Johnathan Willette was not murdered by a stranger. The woman convicted of killing him was more than just his ex. She was the mother of his children and the wife of his son. And that's before we even get into what happened in that house. On the morning of August 7th, 2023, in Henderson, Nevada, Yoko Willette walked into her son's bedroom and found him lying in bed, unnaturally still, decapitated. And this becomes the story of how certain relationships don't always end, they just change form. Because in this case, it wasn't just a relationship gone wrong, this was an entanglement where nobody ever really stepped away, but someone should have. Hey y'all, welcome back to Sister Signs and Red Flags, the podcast where astrology ain't therapy, but girl, it's close. I'm your host, Lika, and if you're new here, hi, hello, and welcome to my show. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, so much love for returning viewers and listeners. It's never deviated and always appreciated. Now, this is a Love You to Death episode, but before we even get into the details of the things, I want you to pay attention to something because this is one of those cases where nothing never really ended. People stayed connected, roles kept shifting, and boundaries were never clearly defined. So as we go through this case, I don't want you to just listen for what happened. I want you to watch the patterns of who never really left, who stayed connected, and where things should have ended but didn't. Because this was the result of a situation that had been building for a long time. A situation where overlap overrode closure. And if you know anything about Taurus energy, you'll know it doesn't always let go easily. It craves stability even when that stability is built on a foundation of secrets. Let's talk about Johnathan Willette. Johnathan Willette was born November 7, 1976 in Tokyo, Japan to James and Yoko Willette into a military family. He was the oldest of three children and spent much of his youth living between Japan, Montana, and California before eventually settling in Nevada, where he would build his life. He worked on the Las Vegas Strip for over 20 years and later became an entrepreneur, starting his business, the Vegas Moving Guy. And when I tell you this wasn't just a moving company, Johnathan did a little bit of everything: window replacements, landscaping, painting, electrical work. Basically, whatever people needed to be done, Johnathan knew how to do it, okay? By all accounts, Johnathan was described as being dependable, outgoing, and the kind of person who always showed up.
Motherfucker here. Gotta give a shout out to Justin. He's fucking hooking me up. It's his partner, boss. Moved all his stuff and put it up nice.
He works hard and genuinely enjoyed helping people in need. But emotionally, Johnathan wasn't surface level, not by a long shot. He formed deep connections with people, the kind where they don't just come into your life, they become a part of it. Now, to understand why this case unfolds the way it does, you need to understand who was in Johnathan's life. Johnathan had three children, a son, Devyn, from a prior relationship, and two daughters, Tamaya and Janaya, with Devyn Michaels. Now, I can't tell you exactly how Johnathan and Devyn met or how their relationship began, but I can tell you this. Even though their relationship ended around 2017 or 2018, their connection didn't. Because according to Devyn, before Johnathan made the decision to move back in with her, he had broken off another engagement and even threw the ring away. So, as you can see, this was a relationship that kept finding its way back. And when you're that kind of person, you don't always walk away easily. You stay connected and involved even when the relational dynamics change. And when you look at Johnathan's birth chart, that makes a whole lot of dollars and cents because he was a Scorpio sun with a Taurus moon, which means emotionally he was wired for attachment. This is the kind of energy that holds on, that stays connected, that keeps people in your life even after that relationship itself has shifted. And that absolutely matters in this case because Johnathan wasn't completely removed from Devyn's life. He was still connected to her. So when you hear that he was planning to move back in to help co-parent his daughters, that comes from someone who never fully stepped away. And when you combine that kind of emotional attachment with a situation that's already complicated, it creates a dynamic that's hard to separate. And when I tell you Devyn Michaels was going to create that separation come hell or high water, let me tell you about this girl. Devyn Michaels was born April 28, 1978, making her a Taurus. By the time all of this happened, she was in her mid-40s, a mother and someone who had already been married multiple times. So this wasn't her first time navigating relationships. This was someone who understood how to move within them. But what stands out in this case isn't just who she was with. It's how those relationships overlap. Because Devyn didn't just have a relationship with Johnathan. She had children with him. And even after that relationship ended, she didn't fully separate from him. They remained connected, understandably still co-parenting. But here's where things get even more complicated. Johnathan actually had full custody of their daughters, while Devyn was only granted supervised visitation, which means there were already limits in place on how and when she was supposed to have access to them. But according to what we know, those boundaries weren't always followed. We're looking at a situation where even the structure that was supposed to create separation wasn't being respected. But then the situation shifts because at some point, Devyn marries Johnathan's son, Devyn. You fucking heard me. And this is where things stop being complicated and start becoming something else entirely. Because now this is entanglement. And when you listen to Devyn's testimony, you start to understand how that relationship functioned. He says their relationship began while she was still involved with his father. He was 19 years old. And that he tried multiple times to walk away, but something kept pulling him back in, namely her ass. And at one point, he says something that really stands out. He says he felt like he was trying to fill shoes he had no business trying to fill.
When you lived with your dad, how was your relationship at that time?
It was fine. I worked with him.
You worked with him too?
Yes, sir.
Doing what?
Anything and everything. From moving houses to setting up backyards.
Moving houses, setting up backyards? Mm-hmm. Okay. So let me ask you kind of a general question before we move on. Is it fair for me to say that your dad was in and out of your life growing up?
Yes, sir.
Did you have a strong relationship with your dad as you're getting into your late teens, early 20s, or was it just kind of a, that's my dad and you don't see him too often, or what?
No, I loved my father, so we had a strong relationship.
Okay. Did there come a point in time when you're living with him at Paladura and working that you guys have some disagreements about work and other stuff?
Yes, sir.
Would you consider your dad to have been a hard-headed person?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was he an opinionated guy?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you ever tell your dad that you had been having a sexual relationship with the father of his other children?
The mother.
The mother. Jesus, I said father. Yeah.
No, sir.
I apologize. Knowing your dad as you did, if he had known you were having a sexual relationship with his mother of his children, is he the type of guy that would have just said nothing and let it go?
Yes, sir.
Did there come a point in time when the family court became involved in the custody of the children?
Yes, sir.
Did Nikki lose custody of the children?
Yes, sir.
Was this before or after you married, if you remember?
After.
So after you married Nikki is when the custody thing happened?
Yes, sir.
Prior to that, were the girls living with you and Nikki at Porcupine Rim for however long you were living there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Dad, to your knowledge, is still living across town?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When Nikki lost custody of the children, did they move back in with your dad?
Yes, sir.
And to your knowledge, did they live out at the Paladura address?
Yes, sir.
Do you know how long they lived at Paladura with your dad?
No, sir.
Okay. Did there come a point in time in the summer months just before your father's death that the girls moved back in with you guys, you and Nikki at Porcupine Rim?
Yes, sir.
Did they stay over the summer?
Yes, sir.
Did they have bedrooms there?
Yes, sir.
And where were you sleeping at the time?
The master bedroom downstairs.
With Nikki?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Were there times that you slept on the couch?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did your sexual intimate relationship continue throughout the course of this time period?
Yes, sir.
I hate to air out your laundry, like I said, but I just have to ask it. When you're having this sexual relationship with Nikki, is it a tumultuous relationship? Okay. Is there a lot of kind of arguing and back and forth, or you describe it for me?
There was arguments back and forth.
Were there times in which you yourself were trying to get out of this relationship?
Yes, sir.
Describe that. How many times? What's going on in your head at this time?
That when I tried to fill some shoes that I had no business filling.
Whose shoes?
My father's.
You need to just get a little bit closer.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
So you believe you said that you were trying to fill some shoes that you had no business filling. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
Okay. As a result of that, did you start to get a little uncomfortable and attempt to leave a couple of times?
Yes, sir.
Prior to you learning of your dad's death, that you learned he was going to move in to the Porcupine Rim address?
Prior, no, sir.
So you didn't know he was going to move in prior?
No, sir.
Okay. Did you learn that at some point after?
I learned after the death when my grandmother was telling me about it.
Okay. Did you talk to your grandma like on the 7th?
The day after, yes, sir.
That tells you everything about the position he was in. This was a dynamic where roads were already blurred and where lines had already been crossed, and where someone was stepping into a place that was never really theirs to begin with. Now, one thing I want to point out is that there was an age difference between them. Devyn was significantly older than Devyn. So when you look at this dynamic, it's hard to ignore that this relationship didn't exactly start on equal footing. At one point, Devyn says Devyn told him she was pregnant and that if he didn't move back to Las Vegas, she would keep the baby. So he moved back from California, only for her to later tell him that she had gotten an abortion. No paperwork or nothing. He just took her at her word. But he left again and moved back to California. But a couple of years later, he returned to Vegas. And that's how they became involved again. Now look, I'm not here to label anything, but I will say this. That wasn't a balanced relationship at all. It was a situation where one person had a little more control over that other person. And when you zoom out, baby, you start to see a pattern. Devyn doesn't fully leave relationships. She stays connected, she maintains access, and when you look at her birth chart, it adds another layer. So Devyn was a Taurus sun, but she also has a Venus in Gemini, and I'm not gonna lie to you, baby, it shows, okay? Because you have multiple marriages, overlapping partnerships, and different names showing up in different spaces. My girl had at least 3, 4, 5 names. I'm not lying to you. But you know what? I digress. The point is this. It's about how she moved within relationships. And when you take it a step further and look at her Capricorn moon, we're looking at control. Because Capricorn energy thinks long term, it calculates outcomes, and it does what it needs to do to maintain stability, even if that stability is built on something complicated. And even when roles change, the connection itself doesn't. Because when Johnathan starts talking about moving back in to help co-parent their daughters, that's someone re-entering a space that was never fully separated to begin with. And when you have a situation like that, where everybody is still connected, but nobody is clearly defined, that's tension. And when you look at this through a Taurus lens, it starts to make sense in a different way because Taurus energy craves stability and it wants things to feel secure and predictable and controlled. But when that need for stability goes unchecked, it doesn't always show up as peace. Sometimes it shows up as holding on to situations long after they've run their course. And in this case, that need for control was about to be disrupted. On August 6, 2023, Johnathan spent the day with Devyn. They went shopping, getting things ready for the girls to go back to school, and at some point, he even started moving some of his belongings into her home. By that evening, Devyn was at the house with Johnathan and his mother Yoko because Johnathan lived with his mother. Yoko would later say that she saw Devyn in the kitchen and they were together talking, moving around the house. And when she asked about her son, Devyn told her Johnathan was asleep. Now, whether or not that was actually true isn't completely clear because there were some discrepancies between Yoko's grand jury testimony and what she later said at trial. But what is clear is that sometime after that, Johnathan was killed. Investigators believe Devyn struck Johnathan with an unknown object while giving him a massage. After the murder, Devyn didn't panic, she moved. She was later seen on surveillance footage out in public, picking up medicine for one of her daughters at the CVS pharmacy. She was wearing like a t-shirt, it was clean. She was calm and composed, drinking her water like nothing had happened. But behind the scenes, the evidence started telling a different story. Johnathan's personal belongings, such as his keys, his wallet, social security card, and cell phone, were all later found in Devyn's possession. And while Devyn initially claimed she couldn't remember what happened, cell phone data and surveillance footage show movement and actions that didn't align with that claim. Investigators believe that after killing Johnathan, she attempted to clean the scene using chemicals like bleach and ammonia. And which you think about mixing bleach and ammonia, that shit'll take you out. Yeah, that's dangerous. But anyway, and that evidence, including his head, may have been disposed of in a neighbor's trash can. Lord have mercy. That's so fucking disturbing. Jonathan's head was never recovered. The weapon used was never found. And even now, there are still parts of this case that remains unanswered. And I'm going to say something here, and I want y'all to just sit with it for a second. Just 1 second. Because Taurus energy is associated with the throat, the neck. And in this case, that's exactly where the final act of violence happened. Now, I'm not saying that's why it happened, but I am saying there's something very symbolic about where this ended because this was about severing a connection. Now, during the trial, Devyn's defense argued that she wasn't responsible for the murder at all. Instead, they pointed the finger at Devyn, suggesting that he could have been the one who committed the crime. But ultimately, the jury didn't agree. Now, initially, Devyn took a plea deal, but later she claimed she was innocent. And at that point, baby, the court and the prosecutor essentially said, okay, girl, look, if you feel that way, we need to give you a trial.
The way that they manipulated and altered and deleted things is wrong. They should not be able to do it, and they have. And for you to be able to look me in the eye knowing that the things are altered and...
You pled guilty, man.
Miss Michaels, you are not to address the state. You are to address me. You are.
The state.
You're addressing Mr. Giordano. You are going to address me.
I don't know what to do anymore. You...
Judge, I'm not comfortable with this record. I'm willing to let her out of her plea if the court is inclined.
I don't know how to face it.
Miss Michaels, I need you to understand what I'm saying to you and answer my question. Yes. Do you want to withdraw your plea and go to trial?
Yes, please.
All right. This plea is going to be withdrawn.
So Devyn went to trial and was ultimately convicted of first-degree murder with the use of a deadly weapon, although weapon unknown.
Okay. Ms. Michaels, what, if anything, would you like to say before I pronounce sentence against you?
At this point, I just feel that anything I say, it won't. The family's looking for certain things and I cannot deliver what the family's looking for. And they're here and I just want them to get their, at least part of their anger out. I know no matter what I say, they're still gonna feel the same way. So just let them have their time and that's all I can say.
Thank you. Devyn?
She was sentenced to 28 years to life with the possibility of parole after 28 years. And as of today, that's where the case stands. Now, I'm going to tell you that if you want a deeper breakdown of the case, I do recommend checking out JustThoughtLounge's coverage of this case because there are so many layers to it. We simply can't cover everything in one episode. So I will definitely link their video in the description box so you can check that out. However, when you strip everything else away, this was the breaking point of a situation that had been building for years. As you know, this will not be sister signs and red flags if we did not talk a little bit more about the astrology in the case. I know I kind of covered that in Devyn and Johnathan's portion, but we're going to touch on it a little bit more because this case is about what kept going long after it should have ended. Because when people think about Taurus, they think about stability, something solid and reliable. But what doesn't get talked about enough is what happens when something refuses to let go. Johnathan and Devyn stayed connected, shared children, stayed involved even after the relationship changed. And then another relationship formed inside of that. So now it's overlap. And when things start overlapping like that, you don't get closure because eventually something shifts, something changes. And when it does, everything that was being held together starts to break because stability built on something unstable doesn't last. It builds pressure, and pressure always finds a release. And unfortunately, Lord have mercy, that release cost Johnathan his life. It cost his mother a son, and it cost his children their father. And that's the case of Johnathan Willette, a situation that wasn't built overnight, but unraveled all at once. Because at the end of the day, this was about what happens when people stay connected long after their relationship itself has changed, when boundaries aren't respected and when roles aren't clearly defined, and when nobody ever really steps away. And if we're being honest, Johnathan seemed like the kind of person who didn't just walk away from people. He stayed connected. He showed up, even when the relationship itself had already changed. And sometimes that kind of loyalty keeps you in situations longer than it should. Because not every red flag is loud. Some of them look like something that never ends. Rest in peace to Johnathan Willette, and love and prayers to his family, especially his children, who now have to grow up without their father. And as always, I want to know what you think. Do you think this was inevitable, or do you think there was a moment where this could have gone differently? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, y'all, stay cute, stay petty, and be safe out there. Bye.